It's just over 3 years now since I started the Classic Golf Clubs channel. One of the earliest videos I made, the third one in fact, and the first to review a full set of clubs, featured a set of Harold Bird & Son irons. Those irons were actually the first set of vintage clubs I ever bought back in January 2016, and they set me off on a journey into the history of UK made golf clubs, and also close to divorce, but we won't talk about that. In that video I gave what information I had on Harold Bird & Son, the company, which I have to be honest was very little. Almost 2 years later I made another video featuring another set of Harold Bird irons, and with further research I was able to provide more information about the company, although large areas were still a mystery. On the back of that video I was contacted by a member of the Bird family, and with their help I'm now able to tell a great deal more of the history of Harold Bird & Son. This encouraged me, as if encouragement were needed, to buy another set of Harold Bird irons that I'd been watching on eBay for a very long time, and these will form the club review section of this video. So before we update the Harold Bird & Son story, let's take a look at those clubs. Okay, so here is that set of irons. We can see straight away it's a wingback style, one of my favourites. Another reason I wanted this set. Very much a copy of the McGregor MT Tourney, right down to that winged emblem there with the B in place of the MT that appears on the McGregor clubs. American tournament model, stainless steel. Let's take a look at the clubs. We've got 2, 4, 6, 8 and the wedge here. If we look at the 2 iron, there we are. On the sole we've got the number 2 and it says double eagle. So it's a 2-headed eagle and it's got 2 stars, which would refer I think to the shaft flex. The double eagle is often referred to as the Thunderbird, which Harold Bird used on a lot of his clubs. So whether this was something that he was using before the war and he just carried it over into this set, I'm not sure. It could have been a cleat mark that he used even back in the 1930s. It is very fitting for the bird name, the Thunderbird. So that's the 2 iron. Let's have a look at the shaft on this one. Shaft is very good. It's a true temper rocket shaft, and we've got the original leather grip on here. So this particular club, the shaft is in excellent condition, but if I then move on to the wedge is, to be honest, very in very poor condition. It's lost a lot of chrome, although it doesn't appear to have penetrated into the actual shaft itself. So that shaft isn't the greatest. And if we look at the actual club itself, we can see that the double eagle is on the back of the club, and we've got American tournament model, stainless steel, and it says wedge, and we've got the 2 stars again. The grooves on most of these clubs aren't the deepest. If we look at the 2 iron, they're very shallow indeed. So I wouldn't expect to get a lot of spin from the grooves on the clubs. I have the set 2 to 9 plus the wedge. I do want to play these, and I was just going to take them out as they are, but having looked more closely at them, I'm a little bit worried about what the state of the shafts is going to be like underneath the grips. For instance, if we look at the 5 iron here, if I rotate that slowly, we can see that it's quite a big lump on there. Whether this is a wooden butt plug under here, I'm not sure. These have been re-gripped at some time. This is a chevron grip by Avon. It's very hard. It's not something I'd want to keep on the clubs really, so I think I'm going to take the opportunity to re-grip the clubs with this chevron grip on it and see what the condition of the shaft is like underneath. The last thing I'd want is for the clubs to fail in my hand. And if we look at the 4 iron as well, so that's the 5 iron, and if I compare that with the 4 iron, I'm going to put these soles level with each other. This is the 4 iron on top. We can see that it's shorter than the 5 iron, so I suspect that the butt plug has been removed from this one. So when I do re-grip them, it'll be an opportunity to fit a new butt plug in there, or a shaft extension of some sort. Here are the Shaft's all cleaned up now. I've got all the tape off. We can see the progression in the lengths of the shafts. We've got 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. The 4 was the one with the broken or the missing wooden plug in there. I've got all that out. I did it by just using the hot air gun, practically burnt it out. And I've come up with an idea of why this has got a longer plug than the other ones. This is the 6 iron, and if we look at the 9 iron there, we can see that the shafts are the same length. So I suspect maybe it was an apprentice, maybe it was a Friday afternoon job, who knows, but it looks as though the 6 iron shaft was cut to the length of the 9 iron. So wait, maybe he mixed up the 9 and the 6, cut this to the length of the 9 iron, realised the mistake and stuck in an extra length wooden plug in there. And it's quite interesting because if I can just turn that round, we can see that it's actually got nails banged in there to hold that into place. Obviously they're aware that it was going to be a bit of a problem, whereas the other ones have just got a punch hole in there to hold the plug in place. The other thing I've noticed looking carefully at these is the rough and readiness of them. They're not particularly well finished, they're not particularly round. It's as though they've just been done with a draw plane or something like that. I know they were going to have a leather wrap on, so they probably weren't too fussed about the finish of them, but it's quite noticeable how variable the finish is on there. So if you can hear a cat meowing, that's my daughter's cat. I'm currently cat sitting and likes to be in on all the action. Right, so what I'm going to do now is use a plane, I think, and just try and round these off a little bit more. And for any cat lovers, here's the cat. There she is. Right, if I can just show you some of these butt plugs. As I say, they're very rough and ready. We can see there sort of high points, low points. I think the bit that goes into the shaft was turned, and then you've just got a plug here, and it looks as though it's just been roughly trimmed with either a chisel or a draw knife or something. But it's certainly not very round, and that's why when we looked at the clubs on the review table, some of the rubber grips were very strange at the butt end because of the shape of these plugs. So what I'm doing here, I've just got a block plane, and I'm just trying to round them off a bit more so that I won't have that issue with high spots and strange out of shape plugs in there. And here are the regrip clubs. I didn't do the 2 iron or the wedge because the leather grips on those were still in very good condition. I'll be playing these irons in part 2 of the video along with some suitable woods and a putter. I hope you'll be able to watch that too. Time now to give what I hoped would be the definitive history of Harold Bird and Son, although there are still a few missing pages in the story. Maybe one day I'll be able to find those too. Harold Bird was born in Walsall in what was then Staffordshire in 1906. Harold had considered the police force for a career but did not pursue this. Instead, a chance event led him into the golf industry. In 1926, hearing that a local golf club manufacturer called Price was going into receivership, he decided to visit the factory and meet the staff. Happy with what he saw, he bought the company using a loan from his mother. Harold Bird was very quick to spot an opportunity and willing to try new ideas. Today he would certainly be considered an entrepreneur. He swiftly learned all he could concerning the manufacture of golf clubs and became involved in all stages. Harold rented a property on Coldmoor Road, Walsall, that had a house at the front with a workshop at the rear, from where he operated his business. I don't have much information about the early years of Harold Bird's company, but following the Second World War, plots of factory land were being sold off, and Harold bought one in Northgate, Aldridge, although he did not build on it immediately. But a new factory was built in the mid-1950s, and for a short while both the Coldmoor Road and Northgate sites were in operation. In 1956, however, a serious fire gutted the Coldmoor Road workshop, and subsequently all production moved to Aldridge. Factory production of golf clubs at this time was still very much a hands-on affair. Woods were made using bought-in roughed persimmon blocks, which were turned to final shape in the workshop using a copying lathe with rotary cutters. This would follow the profile of a master head and produce an identical version in wood. The iron heads were forged by a company in Birmingham, whose name unfortunately have not yet been able to trace. These heads arrived in bags with Harold's details already stamped on them, and shafts were supplied by a local firm, Ackles and Pollock, and the final clubs were assembled and finished by hand. From the outset of business, practically all sales had been to golf club professionals, but in the 1960s Harold Bird recognised the rise of mail order shopping and soon made agreements to supply these catalogue companies with clubs. He typically offered half sets comprising of 1 wood, 3, 5, 7 and 9 irons, a wedge and a putter, and sales were very good. If the golfer later wished to expand his half set, they were left with few options, other than writing to Harold Bird and asking if they could buy directly from him. This could have created a problem for Harold, as he did not wish to upset the club professionals, who were very protective of their own club sales. For them to learn that Harold Bird had started selling directly to the public might well have caused him some lost business. He had the idea of approaching his eldest daughter Audrey and asking her to manage the sales of these make-up clubs. Audrey agreed and ran the operation very successfully from a spare room in her house in Leighton Buzzard. In 1959, Harold's younger son Stuart joined the business and it became Harold Bird & Son. Towards the end of the 1960s, golf saw a new boom, increased television coverage, the glamour of American stars such as Arnold Palmer and homegrown stars such as Tony Jacklin saw the public taking a new interest in golf, and more than that, they wanted to play the game. Harold Bird & Son were ideally placed to supply the burgeoning numbers of new golfers with good quality clubs at affordable prices. The company expanded and at one stage was even exporting to America. Howard himself played some golf, as did Stuart. They both played at Calthorpe Golf Club near Walsall, now known as Great Bar Golf Club. That brings us to another important step in raising the profile of the company. A partnership was created with 1951 Open champion Max Faulkner, whose name went on to appear on several models produced in the late 1960s and into the 1970s. In fact, a couple of models were still available at least until 1983. How this partnership came about is still unknown, but if anyone has any further information to share, again I would be most grateful. The company continued with new introductions of clubs at a fairly regular basis, often a variation on an existing head design and usually incorporating the pin seeker name somewhere. Business was still thriving right into the 1990s and the introduction of metalwoods. Harold Bird died in 1992, but his son Stuart continued the business under the HB&S name. In 2004, the business was acquired by Robin and Sandra Chapman, Sandra being the youngest daughter of Harold Bird and Robin was her husband. They renamed the company Harold Bird Golf Limited and produced clubs using imported components, including graphite shaft. Robin was a golf professional, and his knowledge and experience played a significant part in the introduction of specialist services, such as club fitting. The company website in 2007 proudly stated, "Since 1929 we have produced more than 9 million golf clubs and have established a reputation with a proud tradition." The new company seemed to be offering exactly what the public desired and at a reasonable price. But perhaps the lure of more prestigious manufacturers and even lower prices from overseas importers meant that sales slowed and the business could no longer be made profitable. It sadly ceased trading in 2010 and was finally dissolved in 2011. Before we move on to look at some of the clubs produced by Harold Bird & Son, there are two stories I'd like to share. The first relates to one of a pair of children's clubs that were produced in the 1960s. And has been known in the Bird family as the Prince Charles Club for many years. Family lore says that the club is one of two that were made. The second one was used as the template for a club made of silver that was sent as a gift to Prince Charles. The family can't remember the occasion that the club marked, but I wonder if it might have been for a visit to the area by Prince Charles at some time. The second story concerns the celebrated Maurice Flitcroft, whose exploits in attempting to qualify for the Open have now been made into a successful film. His first attempt at qualifying was in 1976 at Formby, and according to the account of Jim Howard, one of his playing partners on that day, Morris had a set of Harold Bird golf clubs, which were catalogue clubs. His mother had brought those for him, and there were 15 of them in his bag. His caddy had to take one back to the pro shop, so Morris had the regulation 14. I found this picture of Morris practising in the bunker, and if we zoom in, the club he's using looks very much like a Harold Bird & Son Max Faulkner Avenger. Let's have a look at some clubs now. The earliest clubs I have come across are post-World War II models. The first of these are the American tournament model irons, which were introduced in the 1950s. The next design is the Thunderbird American model. This one reproduces the lines of the early Wilson Dynapowered range. Harold certainly knew how to choose the best clubs of the time for his inspiration. With the lack of adverts for putting dates to clubs, I'm unsure which models came next. The Pinseeker and Max Faulkner names appear on many of the irons from the late 1960s to the end of the 1970s. A more complete list of irons produced by Harold Bird is available on the second video I made about Harold Bird & Son, which is linked in the video description. As the market moved towards cavity back irons, so too did the offerings of Harold Bird & Son. Many new models were produced, but the Pinseeker name continued in use. It's worth noting that the identification of later Harold Bird & Son models can be confused with those of an American company called Pinseeker. This American company was founded as R&M Golf in the early 1970s near Monterey, California, by John Riley and Jim Murray. The name was changed to Pinseeker in 1975. The company was bought by Michael Metzger in 1976 and grew to be quite a large outfit. Perhaps their biggest claim to fame is as early pioneers of metalwoods in the modern game, with their bombshell clubs introduced in 1976. If you are in any doubt, the shaft label is often a good method of recognising the Harold Bird & Son club. The woods that Harold Bird produced are most easily distinguishable from each other by the decal on the crown, as are those of most of their UK competitors. Persimmon woods by Harold Bird are not that easy to find, but the laminated woods are among the most frequently encountered on the pages of eBay and similar. Again, this is testimony to the numbers sold and their build quality. I have a large collection of classic woods, and one of my favourites for play is a laminated Harold Bird & Son Jaguar one wood. Harold Bird & Son were also not slow in following the move to metalwoods. Where these were sourced is unknown, but the Far East would be most likely. Well, that completes this look at one of the most frequently encountered vintage golf club brands in the UK. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.